You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Reddy, but my friends call me Spanners. So, let's be friends. We've got a little news show for you today as this horrible autumn break comes to an end. We've got a week until Circuit of the Americas, and we're going to do a specific COTA preview in the week. But with it, there's loads of news. Suddenly, the news ticker is buzzing. So, we're going to comment on Martin Brundle's comments on Reddit that the hybrid era was a mistake. Otmar on the High Performance podcast burnt all his bridges to Endstone. I don't think he'll be going back there. Red Bull blamed their wind tunnel for the recent slump. No one seems to be giving up the 2025 season for 2026. And we discuss why perhaps Hamilton to Ferrari might be a mistake. We are an independent podcast produced in the podcasting shed with the kind permission of our partners and patrons. We aim to bring you a race review before your Monday morning commute. We might be wrong, but we're first. I'm joined by the host of Missed Apex Moto GP, Kyle Power. Hello, Kyle.
Hey, how's it going? This is quite unusual to kind of be sat just with you and not being a host and panel. It's nice.
Well, I think it's absolutely fine. I've been tuning in to you on Moto GP podcast, the Missed Apex Moto GP, and you're the spanners of that. Not like the Temu version, the Temu spanners on the MotoGP.
The Wish version.
That's the one. So we are going to do a little segment in the middle of the show saying why should we as F1 fans check out MotoGP, and then we'll try and get as many people as we can converted and over to you guys, because you guys are actually getting a silly amount of downloads for a new podcast, and you're beating the Missed Apex Formula E team at the moment.
Excellent. That was the initial carrot dangle, wasn't it? The competition is to try to take on the Formula E bunch, and it is I'm very welcome. I welcome that news that we are ahead at the moment.
Well, it does help that MotoGP didn't put itself behind a 30 quid paywall like Formula E has done, but
it's behind a more expensive one actually.
Oh, is it? Oh, it's the same one. Are they both on TNT Sport?
Yeah, it's on TNT Sports, and there is the MotoGP video pass you can buy, which is so you can watch it via the actual. It's like Formula One management will release their own video package, just what basically MotoGP does, but it's really quite expensive. But there are other means to obviously catch up and watch highlights and stuff.
So immediately, Kyle is saying, "Hey everyone, do crimes." Nice. What a strong start.
No, there are highlights. ITV4, I think on the Monday has highlights. There are all above board and legit, as always of me.
Okay, but let's start with F1 Big Dirty News. Big Dirty News. So we're going to go a little bit ripped from the headlines here, and the wonderful people over at r/Formula One did a Reddit AMA and Ask Me Anything with Martin Brundle, where Martin Brundle said F1 must stay relevant despite hybrid mistake. And obviously you can go across to Reddit and catch up with all his answers there. But I think it's interesting to hear such a prominent commentator pundit in F1 talking just flat out about the hybrid era as a mistake. Was the hybrid era a mistake, and why was it a mistake?
It's easy to dismiss his comments basically and say that, it's just an old school former racer is not going to like progression or the hybrid thing. But he has half a point.
Day.
Yeah, he has half a point. And it's Martin Brundle. He knows what he's going on about. And most of the passion and sort of the feeling going when you're there at the circuit. I remember my first time seeing a Formula One car, and my heart was in my. It's a visceral experience. It's pounding, and we've lost the noise element, which I think is important, is really, really important for me. And for a fan, that magic wow factor has gone a little bit.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying, but also I feel no need to have a sound level where I require ear defense. So obviously like 20, 30 years ago, no one cared anything about ear defense. But, as someone who's an artillery regiment for a long time, I valued, I'm so glad that I took precautions with my ears. And the fact that you had to put ear defense on really sensibly kind of negates any wow factor in the sound anyway. I did quite enjoy at Miami that you could sit there in the stands and not need ear defense.
Yeah, but with that as well, it was the feeling like the gear changes, you could feel it in your chest. It was like bang, bang. You could actually feel it happening. And the fact that it was loud, like to the point that it was alarmingly loud and scary, it made them look faster. It sounds silly, but if it's loud and scary, it makes it look more impressive. So I think even if the cars like were 10 seconds slower per lap slower than these cars are, but they had a V10 engine in them, we'd think they look just as quick, if that makes sense. So that little magic bit has gone. So I think Brundle does have half a point there, but it was inevitable, wasn't it? It was inevitable that we were going to have to do something with the engines.
Really? Why?
Well, it's like the trend. It's the modern way of going. Everything evolves, and you have to be on point and modern. Saying, look, we're saving the environment. We're not running around burning dead dinosaurs for fun. We're trying to improve everything for the better, which I think should be off limits for top level sport, to be honest. You don't have to
I
solve
agree.
world social
Yeah.
issues,
No,
but
I agree.
it was inevitable that to get some of the manufacturers in, you're going to have to change these rules. And there's one that I particularly have quite a lot of disdain for, and that's the VAG group, the VAG group, because they were on the sidelines. And I personally think that we have them to thank for these regulations coming in when they did, because F1 were desperately trying to get them to come into the sport, and they were sitting on the sidelines saying they wanted all these rules changed. So they bowed to them, basically, bought in all these hybrid things, and then they decided not to enter the sport. And then they were, and then they weren't. I've seen cats walk through doorways more decisively than the VAG group was with getting into Formula One.
Um,
Like it's crazy, and they really, really like annoyed me with the fact of meddling with the rules. And I think they were a large part of the reason why we had these engines in. So without them, I reckon we could have lasted another 2-3 years with the normally aspirated, maybe.
don't know where my memory and my timeline is going to serve me well here, but did the Dieselgate scandal with the VAG group stop them coming into F1? I think that might have been it, because they got fined quite a lot for basically rigging their diesel emissions tests. So I don't know if that interfered with them entering Formula One. But you're definitely right about the manufacturers wanting things to be road relevant, and I don't think it does have a place in motorsport, because it's sort of the equivalent of, well, we now pay 5p for shopping bags, or bring reusable shopping bags to do our groceries, whilst they build more coal-fired power stations around the world. It's sort of like, it does literally nothing to the overall carbon footprint of the planet to have these sports cars use a little bit less fuel and be a little bit more efficient. So it really was bowing completely to the manufacturers, the car manufacturers. And I think F1 was probably wanting to go that way. So they already saw in the future that perhaps it was going to be a franchise sport going forward. It was going to be a franchise mainly made up of all the top manufacturers. And that's why we led down this hybrid route. But I think Martin Brundle is right that it was a mistake, because it killed so much competition on the sport, Kyle. If you look at what was going on 2012, 2012, 2010, beginning of 2013, and then look at the competition level after the hybrid era, it's definitely been a step down. And it's got to be down to how difficult it is to make these engines. And in the end, we've only recovered from it because they said everybody except Red Bull has to stop developing their engines now so that we can get parity. Oh, but we'll pretend, that Red Bull Powertrains is a brand new supplier, even though it's just the Honda. But in general, they've had to freeze the engines to make them irrelevant, to fix the mistake as a sticking plaster for the fact that they're far too complex for it to be a competitive engine formula.
Yeah, they're hugely complex with the MGUH and stuff like that, which I actually, from an engineering point of view, I actually love. I think the complexity is a good thing. But yeah, look at the first round. Like, some cars were blowing up on the way to the grid, the testing, they're all catching fire. Like that was all quite exciting. And it goes with like the modern trend of trying to save the environment, electric vehicles and hybrid and stuff like that, which I personally think, electric vehicles is a bit of a false dawn. I don't think it's the ultimate solution. I think it's a stopgap. It will work, but I don't think that's the full way it will go. So it was inevitable. They had to do something. I don't dislike these engines in terms of engineering, because they're amazing. So when it come out, and I think it was good that Formula One did. Yes, it was futile. The actual impact that they have, that they have on the actual environment. Like I said, there's coal-fired petrol, like power stations, and we're sitting here with a special bag and a bulb for life. It's futile.
but my
It's
bulb
silly.
for life.
Oh, yeah, it's silly what we're doing, but the technology, it spurred the technology on. And when they released the engine regs and they actually come into fruition for 2014, 50% thermal efficiency in an engine, getting the fuel out of that was almost an impossible target, and all of the engine manufacturers have achieved that now, which is absolutely amazing. So that's really cool, and it's led it on a little bit more. But look at the 2026 regulations. We've had to almost regress and go back and get rid of the MGUH to encourage people in. And it just seems like a complete disaster. So I would have loved to see another 2-3 years of the V8 era. Really.
Yeah. So just for the record, and we're not going to sit here and argue it, but just before any emails come in, I disagree with Kyle. I do think electric vehicles charged by power generated from renewable sources is the future of mass transit. I'm sure we can have that argument elsewhere, but just so you know, though, that is my view. So the 2026 regulations now is again a sticking plaster to say, well, we don't want a full climb down on having these hybrid engines, but we're in a weird crossover point. So whilst you're saying EVs is the stopgap, I think hybrids was the stopgap. So hybrids was basically, how can we not waste this energy from burning the combustion fuels, from burning fossil fuels? How can we maximize that? And so hybrids have achieved that on the road, and there'll be a good couple of decades when we look back on history, the mass transit hybrid era will be, this significant chunk, all leading into EVs. But I think a GAG and the Formula E group still have the FIA exclusive rights on all electric racing for another 20 years. So I think at the very least, they're going to have to do something that's not all electric for 20 years.
Yeah, and I think Brundle said it himself in the AMA, like F1 can never go full electric, and it shouldn't do. It's just not what it's about. It's potentially looking into the next propulsion system, whether they're going to be hybrid or engines. But Tim Rudd makes a really good point in the live Discord chat, our Patreon Discord chat, saying it's annoying that they honed these engines and now they're throwing them out the door. And I completely agree. The engines now are great. They're almost bulletproof reliable. They're only doing 3 power units for an entire season, which is bonkers, including the sprints races. They're amazing power output. Everyone's used to them, and it's now going back more to the chassis. So I'm a bit dismayed that they're now going back to an engine formula, which is going to just completely rip up the order.
But the main thing that was wrong with the hybrid era was because it was so complex, you had this disparity in the engines. So unless you had a Mercedes engine, you had no chance. So now, though, Tim is right. Now it's good because everybody's basically got equal engines. So it's not spec engines, but the same effect as spec engines. But what you've then got is unnecessarily expensive, complicated engines that are all the same as all the other engines. So you've actually got the worst of all worlds. You've got expensive and you can't get an advantage from doing well developing it.
Absolutely. And I think with the regulations, they've missed a trick a little bit to try to bring the cost down, because these are crazy expensive. It's so advanced. And they're kind of regressing in the technology with getting rid of the MGUH. But to try to bring the cost down, they've made them so prescriptive of what you have to do. So all of the engines are going to be incredibly similar. Like very, very similar. I'd love to see rules with some open architecture. So we might have a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder or even a 5-cylinder, and just different ways to go about it. They tell them the power they need, but they don't. To make them work and to make them economically viable, they have to be incredibly prescriptive.
Also, they have to be very, very heavy to make these hybrid engines work. So if you could take away the political element of it and say, well, right, just straight up, what is the best engine, or what's the best set of engine specs we can make for Formula One? I mean, you could say, double the fuel tank, double the amount of fossil fuel that you use, and make people angry. Yeah, again, you're doing the face, but it doesn't matter. That extra amount of fuel that Formula One uses isn't going to move the needle on hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico. That's not the thing that's been making the weather change. It's giant wind machines made by the Democrats.
True, but with everything in modern day, it's about image, isn't it? Like Formula One, for some reason, feels
optics.
Optics. It feels like it has to be the bastion of pushing the technology forward. And look, we're actually not a green sport, but we are really green. And look, we're solving the energy problems of the future. So for some reason, they've put themselves on a pedestal and say that we really must push this forward, which I don't think is really the job of a sport. really, but it is one of the most technology. It is the most technology advanced sport in the world. They're right up there, and they push it forward. So I think they feel a sort of they kind of feel like an obligation to try to be with the trend. So I don't think we'll ever go back to just pure rip snorting V10s burning loads of fuel. The optics just will never suit, unfortunately.
Yeah. So it's very easy for us to say, oh, well, it's got no place in sport. But it is also a business. So from a business point of view, these optics are actually very, very important. But I think it's okay to say that the hybrids were overly complex. Let's move away from that or reduce the amount. I think they're bringing in, what are they getting rid of? The
MGUH. So the basically, so the spool turbo in the engines, you get turbo lag, like in your car, and you've got a diesel turbo car coming off a roundabout, you put your foot down, not a lot happens, and then bump, you get a nice bump of power. So the MGUH acts both as a motor to pre-spool the turbo up, so there's no turbo lag, but also when you finish producing boost and you lift your foot off the throttle, you've still got some residual energy left in the turbo, and that is unlimited. You can claim back as much energy. So that generator that pre-spooled the turbo then turns into, well, the motor that pre-spools it then turns into a generator, and it can harvest electricity. And this is apparently where Honda are really, really strong. And when Mercedes were initially strong, that's really good. But it's hideously complex, very difficult to make work. And that's something that Honda massively struggled with initially on their first, when they turned to F1, they got this totally wrong. But it's something they are now the leaders in. So they've removed this element to make them more simple to attract the other manufacturers in, which does seem to have worked.
Does it? Yeah. What new engines are we getting in 2026 then, Kyle?
Well, we're going to get the RB powertrain sponsored with a Ford. We're going to get the VAG group, whoever, are finally going to enter the sport with Porsche, and they're going to make their, is it Porsche or no, Audi, isn't it? With they're buying Sauber,
right, yeah,
and they're going to make their own engine. And also Andretti had Cadillac, I think Cadillac on board. I think they wanted to enter and make their own engine eventually anyway. So it has attracted a few more suppliers, and Honda said they're returning. They never left, did they? That was all a big ruse to try to get a bit of an advantage.
Kyle, not only did Honda never leave, but that Red Bull powertrain is basically a Honda, right? And so the Ford involvement was just going to be electronics, but now they've tried to build it up. So I'm unconvinced that is Ford coming in and saying, don't worry, Red Bull, you park it. When it comes to power unit stuff, just put your feet up. Ford have got this. No, I'm yet to be convinced that that's happening. So I'm not dismissing Ford out of hand. I'm just saying I'm not sure how much Ford counts. Audi will be the big one. Is it 2026? Are they coming in with an Audi power unit 2026?
Yes, I think so. I believe so. And also, it's kind of props to Red Bull, really, because they've set up Red Bull powertrains, even with the Ford involvement. That's a huge company there they've set up. To make your own engine from scratch is a daunting task. Yeah. But I think they're on target. They have been making some noises saying, might be a bit of pain at first, but this is the way to go. So it'd be really interesting to see how they do, and actually how much involvement. I'm sure it'll all come out in the woodwork, but how much involvement Ford have actually had in that.
Well, but can I counter by saying we've lost Renault? So
yeah, boo-hoo.
Yeah, no, I know, but that's sort of your case of it's attracting more variety of engine manufacturers.
Yeah, true.
Well, we've lost Renault, and we've gained Audi. So I don't know. I think if you come out of next season and you find that one group of engine customers is doing really well, like in 2014, like only the Ferrari powered cars are in the top 10, then you got to go, it's a bit of a fail. Whereas if they're all more or less even on power, on horsepower, then you go, okay, good. They have hopefully done something sensible, which means they can still have all the optics of it being a hybrid engine without it affecting the sport and without making it massively heavier. So they are slightly lighter cars. It's interesting, me and Matt speaking to the person who designed the Gen 7 cars, and, really was pressing the fact of
NASCARs.
Gen 7 NASCARs. And if you're going to have things that are very similar, what's the point in them being very expensive? And it's such a good point, because what was the cost cap about if it wasn't to drive down costs? And then you introduce something massively complex.
Yeah, it's kind of frustrating in a way to do that, and it's weird that they've kind of set all these sort of regulations up, and they had a team which looked like lots of backing, like Andretti coming in, and then basically snubbed them. And we're like, no, and they're making sort of Audi, VAG, whoever they are, coming in to take over Sauber. Wouldn't it be great if we could still have a Sauber and have them as an 11th or a 12th team and come in as a full factory effort, which I think they probably could have done. and it's kind of like a half entry now, which I don't really like. But yeah, they've kind of backed themselves into a corner a little bit. So what is the actual solution really? I mean Vettel with his FW14B, his 1992 Williams car. He did some of the demo laps at Silverstone, didn't he? Running it on fully sustainable biofuel, I believe. So that could be done. And the 2026 regs, I think they're going to be fully biofuel. I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I've got
That's
issues.
kind of
I've got issues with that. You know, the biofuel one is like a lot of vegan stuff. It's really not good unless everyone can do it. And people argue with me all the time when I say stuff like this. And so, you know, there's a deeper conversation to be had. But the entire mass transit network isn't going to move over to sustainable biofuels. We don't have the land to do that. And then people come up with things like, yeah, but we can build 47-story multi-pods where we grow these biofuels. Yeah, really? Are you going to? You know, there is a certain amount of arable land in the world, and we're using pretty much all of it.
also water supply. It uses an insane, a lot of water supply to do this. And in certain parts of the world, that just isn't feasible. So
Yeah.
I don't think it scales up well. But for something like Formula One sport, they could go that way. But again, the optics that we spoke about, that doesn't really fit in solving this world issue. So it is mightily frustrating that it's a typical F1 cycle, isn't it? You have a massive rule change. You have not very competitive racing. Then you finally get convergence and start getting amazing racing. And then they tear it all up again and start again. And the never ending cycle starts once again.
Just got a quick shout out to Kovox, who sort out our email. Tomo, can you just make sure that we've got more email storage space for when, because I shouldn't have said vegan, should I? Shouldn't have said it. And the biofuel people, email Kyle. Now you can email us. You can email us at spanners@missedapex.net or feedback@missedapex.net as well. Oh, and we've got a new season of iRacing bubbling up. So the planning stages have happened. If you want to get involved in that, if you're an iRacer and you want to come and race with me and Kyle, did you win the championship this year, Kyle?
I didn't.
No,
I was bridesmaid again. I've been bridesmaid a lot. I've been P2 lots.
So race control at missedapex.net if you're an iRacer and you want to get involved in our next season. We've got some surveys going out to our existing iRacing people as well to decide what we want to do for that next season. Okay, I think we've beat this horse to death. I was going to go on more about sustainable fuels, but again, that is optics. I think that one's misguided optics because the manufacturers are never going to go, right, actually, we've dumped EVs now. We're going to do sustainable biofuels. Because basically what they're then doing is having engines that can run on fossil fuels. They're not going to go backwards. It's going to be, at best, a diminishing market. Right. So Haas are hooking up with Toyota, Kyle. Toyota are back. They're back in Formula One, kind of. Why should I care?
Ish, kind of, half. This is such a weird arrangement. So they're coming back with Haas, not as a title sponsor, but as a long-term technical partner. So this has a few ramifications. The whole thing is extremely odd. You've got Haas powered by Ferrari with a technical link up with Toyota. It doesn't really make much sense. But if you look at their whole outlay of what Haas are, Haas, if you're talking about Formula One, I've always likened Haas to, they're not constructors, they're assemblers. So basically they assemble bits that other people make for them. So they've got Dallara making the chassis. They buy the engine, gearbox, and most of the suspension parts from Ferrari. They're essentially a Lego set of Formula One team.
Can I interrupt though to say I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I absolutely love the concept of customer teams, and I believe if you've got the racing spirit and you've got something in your head and you've got racing passion, you should be able to come into Formula One and buy things off the shelf, make up the best combination for you, bring in talented young drivers, and go for it. And then over time, if you can hold your place in Formula One on what I think should be a 30-car grid with pre-qualifying, then you go, actually, do you know what? We've built up enough in the kitty now. Let's start making our own front wings. Let's buy our own wind tunnel. So I don't have any objection to the Haas model. Come in, be a customer team. That's fine by me.
Yeah, and they have done it really, really, really well. So all of this Toyota sort of linking in with them is quite a good thing because at the moment they're getting Dallara to basically manufacture stuff for them and do a lot of the composites manufacturing. So Toyota also, this is mutually beneficial. So there's not Toyota just chucking loads of money to have their name put on the car. That would just be an Alfa Romeo style
Oh, it's not that.
sponsorship.
It's
and
not
that
that.
really winds me up because that was, there was nothing Alfa Romeo about that Sauber at all,
No.
apart from the Alfa Romeo written on the side.
But are we
with
sure that this Toyota isn't that?
Yeah, because it sounds like it from all the statements they've been saying. Basically, Toyota want to. It's very, very Japanese. This is just like what Honda used to do. They want to train their engineers and give them experience into Formula One without actually having to have their own team. I think when they left at the end of 2009, Toyota were burnt quite hard. I mean, it went 2000, 2009. They basically Toyota was a massive flop in Formula One. They threw epic amounts of cash. They had I think one of the biggest budgets in the whole sport at one point, and they just got terrible results because of just the whole philosophy and the way it went about it wasn't correct. So this time they can come in sort of a soft entry, sort of relaunch into Formula One. They can train their engineers in the Formula One environment, but more importantly, they can give Haas the budget and money to run their previous cars. So there's like the old cars. So Formula One teams are allowed to run the cars which are more than 2 years old, 2 years older or more, so they can run this. So Toyota actually look at this as an opportunity to Haas can run the couple of year old car, but the Toyota can train their engineers and mechanics on how to run it, behind closed doors, and also test out some of their budding young drivers and stuff like this. This is something that Haas has never really been able to do. So Toyota are going to help them out with this. Haas will always also have access to the Toyota facility in Cologne, which is amazing. They have like a very advanced wind tunnel. I mean, McLaren were using it for a while, and they've got their WEC program coming out of there, and their rally championship team coming out of there. So Toyota can actually help them expedite manufacturing stuff as well. So instead of having to go to Dallara and wait on a long lead time, they can get Toyota to help manufacturing stuff for them. So there's still going to be an assembler thing, and Toyota get their name into Formula One. They get to train their engineers. They get to put some of the young drivers in some of the old cars, and they're also going to build Haas. They're also going to build Haas a simulator as well. So they're still going to have the Ferrari link up. It's a very unusual thing. It's very Haas, but I actually think it sounds very mutually beneficial and something that I think Toyota have kind of sought out and looked for. So a bit surprising, all a bit strange, but it kind of does make sense when you lay it all out on the table.
It's a bit modern family though, isn't it? Ferrari, Haas, Toyota. It's a bit strange to go, right, where do all these pieces slot in? So Toyota don't want to come in and make a power unit. That's fine. So it makes sense to Haas to have that just be a pure customer team from Ferrari. But does that mean that their technical partnership with Ferrari in other ways, is that gone? Is that dead?
No, that's still there. They still have a design center and a hub with Ferrari, but I think Ferrari have had to put some rules down saying, hey, where's the line here? You're not going to be giving away any secrets or IP, which of course they don't because they're very separate teams. They're blatantly not just switching shirts or hats.
Anymore.
There was rumors
not
of this
anymore.
before. Not anymore. There's some skullduggery going on previously, apparently. Allegedly.
Reported. It was reported that's you cover. Yeah, it was reported that some Ferrari engineers put on different shirts.
No libel here. So that's all still going to happen. So obviously there's going to be boundaries. So basically they're coming in as basically some manufacturing support and basically some money support. So it is kind of like a sponsorship in a way, but not. It is a very unusual arrangement. But also, it has actually come out and said that they're on a bit of a skeletal staff, really. So they said if some of their engineers and race team engineers, got sick or couldn't make it or left, it'd leave them in a bit of a tight spot. They actually don't have that much contingency. So if they're running previous cars with some of the Toyota engineers and manufacturers, then they could potentially draft them into the Haas race team. So it gives them a bit more staff coverage and a bit more contingency as well. So that's obviously quite a smart move because, Haas are the smallest team. They've got the smallest budget and everything. So any help they can get is good. And they're really serious. I mean, they're being quite bullish and saying, I think they're going places. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
I think in an older era of Formula One, Toyota might have come in and just put in an offer and said, we'll just give you 200 million for the outfit and take it over. But these days now, there's only a limited amount of franchises. So Haas can turn around and say, well, 1 billion. And in fact, you would still be stupid to take 1 billion. Because according to a lot of projections, F1 is still on the up when it comes to value long term. And so why would you give up a $1 billion franchise that's going to be a $3 billion franchise in 10 years? So I think in the olden days, this would have just been hard selling. But now the And I think it's the same with Alpine as well. The guys with the checkbooks, the guys with the balance sheets are always just going to say, no, don't sell, come to some other arrangement. So this could be the beginning of what would have been really a Toyota takeover. And they're going to have their name all over the car. They're going to be back in F1. They're going to have all their hospitality. And who knows how much control they have on the management. So do they end up in charge of hiring and firing? Do they end up in charge of, as you alluded to, placing their own drivers in?
Hopefully not, because if you know, they have heard the stories of how Toyota previously managed to epically fail Formula One. Was again, we've seen this with Honda previously as well. The bureaucracy and levels of bureaucracy and management, so they couldn't put updates on the car. Everything had to go to Japan to have their blessing. They were European based, they were based in Cologne, but everything had to go via Japan. Decisions by committee. Honda also suffered this when they were in cars, and you just see it's just the way of working, and the companies are not agile enough for Formula One. It works different. Formula One, everything's happened yesterday already, and you need to be really, really quick. You need to have all your updates ready to go and be super agile and move fast. And so hopefully Toyota don't get involved in any of the management side at all, because I think that would really hobble Haas.
But Haas aren't a team that come in with a bunch of updates. So they aren't a team that are constantly bringing updates in. And I think that's become an increasingly important part of the sport, especially in the hybrid era. And so you look at the teams that struggle with it. So Ferrari as a top team seem to struggle with bringing those updates in, and you go that kind of makes them wobble mid-season, maybe more than the other top teams. And then you look at what McLaren are doing now, and McLaren are suddenly becoming a top team at developing mid-season. So they haven't come out with the best car, I think, or they haven't ended up in a worse position than they started. They've developed well every single season, to the point that now they've got by far the best car 2/3 of the way into the season. And you're not painting a good picture, Kyle, for us that it's going to get any better with Toyota. Because my main thing was thinking, well, if you have to keep subcontracting everything out to Dallara, there's a huge lead time onto that. But if we now have to go via Cologne and then Japan, that's not an upgrade.
I think it is. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they can basically order parts they can order parts from Toyota even. They were like, look, we've got a new rear wing, or we've got a new front wing, you can manufacture it to us, and they'll get it quicker and maybe a bit cheaper in how they do the books. I'm not sure how it's all going to work with the cost cap, but yeah, if Toyota don't get involved in the management side, Haas now have access to their facilities and the rigs. So Haas did make a comment saying that they kind of don't really have the facilities to check out and to try and run some simulations to try and look at some of the issues they have. Toyota could give them the chance to do that now, and they've got a lot more diagnostic tools at their disposal now. So it's probably going to take a few years before we see any impact whatsoever, but they're setting themselves up for the future, and they mean business. So I think this is a really positive thing for Haas. Just, I don't think we've really seen this sort of link up in F1 before. It's a very, very unusual sort of hodgepodge of manufacturers, sponsors, and technical partners.
So we're going to, I think, talk about a few teams, wind tunnel and development now. But while we're on that, Haas, I think, has been a project where they burst onto the scene doing, I think, didn't they finish 5th at one point in the constructors?
Yeah, I think so. That was at their peak. Wasn't that? Was it 20?
It was early in the.
They come in 2015, I think. No, they came in 2016 before the big reg changes in 2017. And they finished 5th in their first race, remember? Or they were going to finish 5th. I think they're really surprising. My memory is failing me spectacularly.
No, but they seem to have gone down a path that Williams had that sort of path where, as they were declining, or as things weren't going well, or perhaps they didn't have the same versatility for downforce, aero, in-season development, they'd gone for this tactic of, right, well, what can we do? How can we be efficient? Let's get a platform that's efficient, so that's fast in a straight line, but not necessarily do the things that the other teams are doing, like bolting on a lot of downforce. So say, for example, the 2014 Williams and this Haas have that trait of, you do not want to get stuck behind a Haas. So at the moment, how many times have we seen Hamilton or Perez get stuck behind Hülkenberg and they just can't find a way past? And I think that is what you have to do if you don't have this dynamic ability to upgrade. You just go, right, what's the most efficient car we can get? Let's go in straight line as fast as we can.
Yeah, or stick on a set of tyres and make them do a crazy one-stop strategy, and they do that and they just roll the cards. And sometimes, and more often than not, it does pay off. They've managed to get some points. And if you look at the budget and the resources, they are the smallest team by far, and they're not a true constructor in the sense of the word. As I said, I liken them more to an assembler, but they should be last. They should be at the bottom of the World Constructor Championship, and they're not. They're ahead of Sauber. I think they're even ahead of Williams at the moment. Like they're actually doing quite well, and they'd have said they're kind of being like the old Force India, which are like the perennial overachievers, just like constantly with their small budget and stuff like that. And so they're doing really, really well. So it's going to be fascinating. I think it can only be a positive thing for Haas, and we want them to do well, but also this is leaving the doors open. If Toyota don't get burned, I think the scars and the ridicule that they rightly received after their foray into Formula One in the noughties was not good, and I think they're burnt, and I think that still cuts deep with them. So if they like what they see and they're going, when the Ferrari deal with Haas, it ends in 2028, I believe. When that's up, there might be an open door for them to basically buy Haas and consume them and come back as a full factory outlet. But this is they can launch and put a foot in the door. This is like Formula One Light, for instance. Like this is a nice soft launch for them back into the sport.
I want to defend Force India. I know you didn't mean it as a slight, but I don't think it's the same with that old Force India, because I think what they did was they used to come out of the blocks, make a genuinely good race car. So I don't think they were just doing that thing of like, right, strip the wings off, let's do a series of rocket launches. They had a good race car, they just didn't have the budget to then develop. So they would fall back. I don't know how many interviews there were with Vijay Mallya going, "Oh my God, what a great start to the season. Do you think you can maintain this?" And he'd just go, "No, no, there's literally no chance. We couldn't possibly maintain it." I don't know how much you know then, if we're talking about wind tunnels and facilities. How much do you know about Red Bull's facilities? There was an interesting comment from Horner saying there's been limitations in their wind tunnel. It was upgraded in 2005, but they can't use it outside of a certain temperature range. This is from a motorsport.com article. And they are actually going to have a new wind tunnel for 2026. But Adrian Newey delayed this wind tunnel being built because there was a chance, and I'd completely forgotten this, there was the chance that F1 was going to get rid of physical wind tunnels altogether and that it would all be computer-based simulations. And that decision was changed because of Aston Martin. So because Aston Martin wanted to build a wind tunnel, they changed the rules for everybody else. Now, you have to imagine that is pressure from, I am Lawrence Stroll, I have a big head. If I want a wind tunnel, you're going to let me have a wind tunnel.
Also, their sponsors and their title sponsors, Aramco, Saudi money. So I think the Saudis are waving a lot of cash around. They want to spend some cash, and I don't think Formula One wanted to stand in their way of spending some cash on Formula One. So they had a quick U-turn on that, which is quite surprising because Adrian Newey, they needed a new wind tunnel. And it's mad that they're holding off for this. So yeah, he clearly that's kind of inferring that Aston is kind of Formula One's little favorite baby at the moment, maybe.
Well, definitely that seems like a disproportionate amount of power to be able to say, well, because we want to upgrade, then you have to change the whole sporting regs.
Yeah, it's crazy. But what this has highlighted, though, and Horner coming out and saying this, and yes, we know Red Bull have form for maybe underselling themselves or playing the victim a little bit in some cases, but this is genuinely impressive. I didn't really realize how sort of antiquated their wind tunnel was. I mean, Horner called it a relic of the Cold War. It's very, very old. Yeah, yes, I think this could be Hornerism and stuff like that, but they do have an old, compared to other teams, they have a very, very old wind tunnel setup. So I think that you have to doff your cap to Red Bull, because producing that many championship winning cars with antiquated facilities is what they're making out is mightily impressive. But I do think they have identified they are having some correlation issues and stuff. And also, yeah, if the temperature, and this is, we're in Bedford, we're in the UK, below 5 degrees and above 25 degrees, that can almost happen in a day here. So there must be several things where they can't run it, and the weather here is crazy at the moment. So I think that's a huge kudos to Red Bull for producing the cars with a slightly old wind tunnel, and a bit terrifying, really. Well, they're losing Adrian Newey, but I don't think he had that much huge influence on their cars over the last few years anyway, maybe.
Well, we'll see.
Bits and bobs. But I don't think, the press and media make out as if Adrian Newey's drawn every bit of this car, on his own notebook and everything, which I think is quite far from.
He's got it tattooed on his thigh.
Yeah.
The airflow.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see when they get their new wind tunnel, see if that really helps them. Because in theory, if they've got Adrian Newey and they get this new wind tunnel, that could be the way they're making out. That could be terrifying. They could be absolutely unstoppable. But should we just go back? Wind tunnels being banned. I mean, Virgin. Remember the Virgin car when they came out in 2010? I think it was Nick Worth who was leading that project, and they were going to be the first ever car that never saw a first Formula car which never saw a wind tunnel. And look how well that turned out. The fuel tank wasn't even big enough.
It's an interesting one because it's been such a staple of Formula One for so many decades. So to see them go that way, I don't know how good computer simulations of wind tunnels are and how well they would correlate to the real world. So I can't comment on that. But yeah, for anyone thinking that -5 isn't a big restriction in Bedford, and I've done a lot of electronics testing in Bedford, as it happens, it is probably below -5. Oh no, below 5, not even -5, below 5.
Yeah.
Oh right, so it's below 5 for the whole winter. So if that's all of winter testing, then they have those issues with their wind tunnel. What's interesting, I think, is both Red Bull and Mercedes have said that they are going to continue pushing for 2025. So I don't think any teams are sacrificing 2025 for 2026, but Red Bull are not going to change their core platform. So they're saying they're evolving from what they've got now, which is the same decision they made from last season to this season. And I can't help but feel that is a huge error. I don't see Red Bull building on this platform to come back in 2025. It might be the other way. So even though they're saying, we're pushing in 2025, if they stay with the same general concept, this could actually be them quiet quitting this set of regulations and focusing on 26.
Maybe I do disagree there, though, because I think for this season, they did change their concept quite dramatically. They've gone for the overbite on the side pods, where everyone copied the old Red Bull design from 2022 and 23. For this year, they actually changed their concept quite dramatically, and it was great at the start of the season. They changed. Remember all the talk at the start of the season when they've gone for these funny overcut side pods, and they're like, oh my god, they're going to use a zero pod concept. They're going to go and do what Mercedes couldn't work. So Red Bull did have quite a dramatic change in concept, and why they said they did that was they thought they'd hit the limit with their previous concept. I think they could have. It was so dominant. I think they could have kept developing it, but this one, so they changed the concept to give themselves more headroom and more development room, but they've kind of got it slightly wrong in this era. So I think sticking with this concept, which they changed to give more headroom, makes sense, but they need to sort out some of their issues. I think they said they have identified the problems with the car, and they are apparently, according to Marco, going to have a really, really good update for COTA. So it's going to be fascinating to see how they go at COTA, because if they're not suddenly the quickest car again, then I agree with you. I think they could be in trouble for next year.
There's a good question here from EJ. Would you rather have wind tunnels or testing days?
Oh, love it.
Great question.
Clear testing days with free public access, like they used to back in the good old days. You used to be able to trot down to Silverstone. I remember went there in 2006. It was free. You could go and watch the in-season test at Silverstone for free. So always cars on track will always be preferable over behind closed door simulations.
And you'll have more young drivers getting F1 seat time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You could have the Toyota young drivers driving around in a Haas doing lots of tests, couldn't you?
Okay, I have a plan for the next few minutes, Kyle. So I think we're going to end the show by arguing about Binotto's comments, because Binotto said he wouldn't have had Lewis Hamilton join Charles Leclerc at Ferrari. And we've had some comments from our close personal friend, Juan Pablo Montoya, saying that he's very optimistic and that that Ferrari need to really pivot towards Hamilton. And you and I have different opinions on how it's going to go. You're a bit negative on Hamilton's new adventure to Ferrari, whereas I have to be positive because I had too many beers a few nights ago and I bought all my Ferrari merch already.
Oh, you're down the road. You're like two-footed tackle in. You're fully committed.
I'm all in. Let it ride. Red 34. But firstly, I really want to talk for a few minutes about a year-long podcast that we've had. So our little side project, Missed Apex Moto GP, has been running a year, hosted by this guy, Kyle Power, with a great crew over there with Jules Sagers. Matt Trumpets is over there. Danny Henney, who's from the north. A little bit of a diversity hire, but he's okay. And then we've got Adam Rosales over there as well, and we've got some new exciting creators that we're talking to also. So if you're already into MotoGP, go and check out Missed Apex Moto GP. But Kyle, why should I check out motorbikes? You know my stance on bikes. They don't have enough wheels. They lean over and don't fall down, which means there's some black magic going on. But why should we tune in?
That's what makes them fascinating. It is the black magic bit. Basically, it's like a bonus Formula One. When there's no Formula One on, you generally tend to have Moto GP sometimes. So the two things I've always followed, it's basically Formula One on two wheels. The cars are absolute like these are pure. Sorry, the bikes are pure prototype thoroughbred races. They've got cool technological developments, and what I like about MotoGP versus F1 is, in Formula One, let's face it, like the car is 95% of the equation, the driver's 5%.
Yeah, we could argue the exact number.
It might be 92%. In MotoGP, it's more like 70% bike, 30% rider. It might even be 60-40. The rider can make much more of a difference. So that's really cool to watch. And you can see the different styles. So it's not a helmet sitting in the cockpit. This is a rider clambering all over a 300 brake horsepower monster, trying to stop it killing them, and also racing at the same time. And you get to see, and the riders have such different styles and flair, and they're getting more and more extreme. So one of the guys leading the championship at the moment, Jorge Martin, you see some still shots of him leaning over, his shoulders on the floor, his elbows on the floor, his head's about an inch off the floor, about sort of 100 miles an hour. And it is just breathtaking to watch these. I think they're gods, basically, in my opinion. Like the heroism you have is something you don't get in Formula One. Yeah, motorsport is inherently dangerous, but MotoGP, Formula One, you lock a front tire, you're going wide. In MotoGP, they lock a front tire, they're face planting into the tarmac, and they're juggling all this risk reward. There's a lot of risk that they take whilst bashing handlebars and racing. It is absolute white knuckle adrenaline from start to finish.
Can I defend the four-wheeled form of racing, the correct form of racing there for a second, which is that it's because you can see so much of the rider, it's definitely more visible. I don't think you could say that in a Formula One car, they're not having to make, a million little adjustments through the corner. But with MotoGP, like, you can really, really see it. But I grew up watching MotoGP and superbikes because my dad watched superbikes, MotoGP, Formula One, and rugby league. So obviously rugby's garbage. And so I ended up, what I found though, watching the superbikes, was the tracks are almost too big for the bikes, and they kind of could go past each other almost. And I never quite fell in love with that form of racing.
Oh, well, you would really love modern day MotoGP, because from hardcore purist bike fans, some people don't like the modern era of MotoGP because we've had a lot of aerodynamics come into there now. Aerodynamics and ride height devices and shapeshifters, people call them, where they can drop the rear end of the bike. They've got so many gadgets on now that it's actually turning the racing a bit more Formula One orientated. So they find it hard to follow, and they're all so on the limit now that actually it's quite tricky to overtake, and overtaking usually gets very rude. Like, they do overtake. Yes, you can launch it up the inside, but there's certain riders out there, like someone like Marc Marquez out there, who, if he's sitting behind somebody, he will just launch it. He will try something, and there might be a bit of a collision and a bit of bumping. So you always get it in MotoGP. Passing is easier, but it's less frequent. Like, I know back to the days that you used to watch in the 90s Superbikes, because I used to watch it as well. Carl Fogarty and Aaron Slight, and they're all bashing handlebars, and there's like loads of moves. Amazing. You still have that in the support classes of MotoGP. Just watch Moto3. It's war. It's just absolute war against 20 riders. It's amazing. But eventually now it's a bit more considered. You've got your tyre wear. Basically, it's a mini scaled down Formula One race to 45 minutes. They've got a bit of tyre wear. They've got tyre pressures to think about. They've got aerodynamics. They've got their ride height devices, and it gets really quite technical. But what I absolutely love is the fact that you get different characters come in. They're a bit more natural. It's not so PR sort of.
Nice.
Some of the riders will say what they think, and it's the storylines and the subplots that you get, because you get some riders that really don't get on with each other, and you can see they are very, very rough and tumble when they get out on track.
So actually, I think F1 has suffered from that recently, even though people might say the opposite, that Drive to Survive has brought the characters to life. It's all very controlled when the microphone is in front of them. They're all PR trained to death. So I've obviously been getting into NASCAR, and I find now that I really don't want to miss a NASCAR round at the moment. But even getting into the Xfinity series, when the drivers get out of the car, they really unleash. They say what they want. You speak to the spotters and the crew chiefs, they're fully unleashed. They say what they want. And whereas in F1, it's much more controlled. So if MotoGP is a little bit more the other way, then that's, and I get it because there's so much money washing around in Formula One. The sponsors have a say. They're going to be restricted all day long. But I don't quite know why it's quite so sterile in Formula One at the moment.
I think it comes to, again, it's the heroism in MotoGP. There's so much more on the line. You know, they are quite literally risking their lives, and you know they can injure each other. They can get really seriously hurt at a moment's notice, and so the adrenaline runs higher, the passion runs higher, the emotions generally get a little bit higher, and it's these subplots that you get. So coming into next season, this season there's I think it's 5 rounds of this season left, and the championship fight is delicious. It's been flip-flopping and U-turning every
it's
single.
Bagnaia and Marquez?
Jorge Martin. So there's two of them. So there's Bagnaia and Jorge Martin this year, but the interesting dynamic is you've got Pecco Bagnaia, who's like the factory Ducati. So you say in Formula One you like customer teams. In MotoGP you have that. So you have the GP25, the current dominant bike, which is the Ducati, but there is a privateer team that basically rents some GP25s and they get full factory support. And so Ducati, their young protege was a guy called Jorge Martin, who almost won the championship last year but didn't, was second. He's actually riding for a privateer team, Pramac, who rent the bike. So this is like Ferrari renting out their cars to another team to come in, and they get the full package. But Ducati have turned their back on their young protege and signed the elusive Marc Marquez, like probably some people will argue the greatest of all time. You could do is like up there with Valentino Rossi. So they've turned their back on the young protege to sign Marc Marquez. But the young protege on the private bike is currently leading the championship. And if he wins, he'll be taking the number 1 plate away to a different manufacturer, which they really don't want to happen. So there's this bizarre scenario where they're supporting him, but they don't really want him to win. And it's fascinating to see whether they will sabotage him or what they're going to do for the rest of the round.
All right, that's about as much pandering to your MotoGP project.
Sorry,
I can
take. I feel much better. I hope it was good for you as it was for me.
Okay, when's the next round?
It is in not this weekend coming. It is it's next weekend actually, and it is in Australia, Phillip Island, which is a very fierce, fast track. So yeah, I will tune into that because it will be dramatic. It is
Phillip Island. Oh my goodness, I've done that in the sim, and that's quite a crashy track. It wants you. Every corner wants to kill you.
Yeah, and they're entering turn 1 at like 220 miles per hour, bashing handlebars. It's going to be absolutely rip snorting, and also it's just had a full resurface, which is probably going to be very, very abrasive surface. So it's all going to come down to tire wear and strategy.
Okay, so go and follow Kyle at Kyle Power F1.
Yes,
that's not a very good Twitter handle for a MotoGP host, is it?
No. If you are bike curious, it is a great time to enter MotoGP, but don't let the F1 in my handle fool you. I cross between them. I'm fluid.
So he's bilingual. So go and follow Kyle at Kyle Power F1 on Twitter, he'll keep you updated on what's going on there. I try to retweet the MotoGP stuff as it comes out. So you've got 5 races to watch this title run in, and then you can check out the best MotoGP podcast that exists. All right, let's fight. Right. Bonotto says he would not have taken on Hamilton. So Mattia Bonotto, now the Sauber team principal. I think, is he officially the team principal?
Yeah, he's taken over from they've sacked Seidel off, haven't they? Because it was Andreas Seidel, and they've sacked him before he's even got started and put Bonotto in. I agree with Bonotto. I absolutely agree with him.
No, so here we go. So but Bonotto's not in charge of Ferrari anymore, and so he's clearly not in charge of Ferrari for a reason. Ferrari had a good look at what Bonotto was doing and decided to go elsewhere. So we've now got Fred Vasseur in charge. And you have to imagine that it was Fred Vasseur that led that charge to get Hamilton in. So this is a Vasseur hire. And this is now the old boss going, well, I wouldn't have done that. So that's my first take it with a pinch of salt, is that, he's kind of trying to say, well, I obviously had a lot of faith in Leclerc. So while he was there, he had Vettel, brought Leclerc in, and Vettel looked comfortably faster than Leclerc, and then at a flick of a switch, something happened. At the flick of a switch, almost overnight, suddenly Leclerc was the faster driver. Vettel couldn't keep up. Vettel was getting very frustrated, culminating, I think, in Interlagos, where they made contact a couple of times going down towards turn 4. Do you remember that? And when that happened, I went, oh, I think maybe Vettel's lost his little I'm the Ferrari guy, because Ferrari love to have their guy, don't they? They have their Schumacher. It was Raikkonen, and then it was Massa, and then then it was Vettel, or no, it was Alonso before that. But they love to have the guy, and you watch them change who the guy was overnight, and then suddenly Vettel, was he let go from Ferrari?
No,
I can't remember.
think,
Did he decide
was he
to leave?
I think he left. I can't actually remember. But they also do tend to hang on to their elders. I remember them hanging on to Kimi Raikkonen
for a long time,
for years when he was like
yeah.
tragically underperforming for years. So I was actually really happy when Leclerc got the shot. But yeah, it was a shame to see Vettel's downfall. But what I think Lewis, I'm a massive Lewis Hamilton fan, but I think it's just going there for a retirement paycheck, maybe.
I don't know. No, I don't see. This is it. I don't think so. I think this is in line with Ferrari picking their chosen one. So it was clear when Vettel was on his way out, whoever's choice it was, the writing was on the wall. Before he left, the writing was on the wall, and we can go back and listen to episodes. I was calling it that he had fallen out of favour. Then Leclerc became the chosen one. But they've had a good long look at Charles Leclerc. And I can't help but feel that bringing Lewis Hamilton in on so much money, and it, that is going to mean that they are going to be very emotionally invested in Hamilton doing well. So whether or not they're going to win the title or not, Ferrari will choose a driver to be the number one. They are not adverse to cracking open a gearbox to move someone down the grid to give Alonso a slightly higher start position at Interlagos. So I'm very worried for Leclerc. He's playing it very cool. He's doing all the right things. He's saying, no, it's brilliant. I'll be tested against the best. He even said it would be good to learn from Lewis Hamilton. So from someone at a top team in their like 6th or 7th season in Formula One, however long Leclerc's been in, for him to turn around and say, well, actually, I'm going to learn from my new teammate coming in, I feel like maybe he has got a better handle on the situation, and maybe he's a bit more realistic about the situation than some Leclerc fans might well be. So I think that if Ferrari have a title contending car, it's going to be a Hamilton-focused title contending car. Because if you bring Lewis Hamilton in for 450 million or whatever this 3-year contract is and all the bells and whistles around it, then you have a title contending car, and Lewis Hamilton then goes and wins that title for you, you are going to look like a genius. And that's my worry for Leclerc.
Yes, you are. And that's kind of half of my, I think this is more of a commercial stunt rather than a pure competitive thing. Because, Lewis, especially when they signed him, I don't think he'd particularly been having a very good run. I think he'd been slightly off the boil. I do think 2021 broke him slightly, and this new generation of cars just doesn't suit him. And I thought he was quite poor, but their decision almost paid off overnight when all their share went through the roof and stuff like this. So this is more of a commercial sort of marketing strategy, I think. Leclerc has been proven himself to monster track to be very mistake prone. So this is almost a win-win for Ferrari. They're going to get, whatever happens, they're going to make money from this. They're going to make a lot of money from this. They're going to test Leclerc out. This might be the ultimate test for Leclerc, because I didn't massively rate Sainz, to be honest, and he's kept Leclerc amazingly honest, like way more honest than I think he should be doing. So there's some big question marks hanging over Leclerc, but the real risk for Lewis is, there's no spring chicken.
No, right. Isn't it sort of win-win though? Because if he loses to Leclerc, you kind of go, yeah, well, he's 40. Psh, yeah, he's 40. But look, they've already made money out of me. I've already bought my Ferrari merch. So commercially, you're right. It makes sense to everybody because there is going to be a wave of red purchases. I'm not the only person coming from silver to red.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I'm worried though for Lewis. When I first read it, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, wow, this is amazing.
Same.
But I think I was saying in the group chat, I was like, I'm actually full of a bit trepidation. I'm a bit worried about this because I think there's a real possibility Lewis can go there. He's not going to suit or gel with the car or with the team. Yes, he said he's learning Italian and stuff like this. So, and he's referenced Schumacher before. So I think he might be trying to have his Schumacher, Braun, Rory Byrne and Todd sort of era. I just think he could go there and it just won't work. He could be miles off the pace, miles off Leclerc, and he's going to damage his legacy. And look, but yeah, if he makes money and is commercially good, yes, but it's not. I think it's a real risk that this could backfire, go wrong, and he's going to go out on an absolute whimper, which I think will be a massive shame. I mean, it'd be horrible to see him basically have a Raikkonen end to his Ferrari career, because that was going out quite limp.
Or even
and
a Schumacher.
Vettel was just all over him. Schumacher coming back for his second career in Mercedes, it was a bit different. Like, Schumacher left Ferrari he's forced out for Raikkonen, wasn't he, at the peak of his powers pretty much in 2006. I think Lewis is thinking it's going to be the Schumacher era. He's going to go back and get this new level of dominance. But particularly with all of the rumblings of Mercedes apparently have nailed the 2026 PU regulations again. Like, everyone's saying Mercedes is way out in front. Oh, I think this could be a bit of an own goal, maybe.
Mercedes have been saying that they're about to nail it, though, since 2022. So I'm not sure how much faith that I've got in that. I'm sure every team is optimistic. And, apparently Renault were doing very well with their 2026 power unit, and Ferrari are going out there trying to headhunt for Renault power unit guys from Viri. So,
yeah.
Okay, a couple of things there. Firstly, the share price thing, I think that has been debunked a little bit, because I think it actually coincided with a profit announcement. So Ferrari were doing like an annual profit announcement, and it upticked, and it just happened to coincide with the Hamilton. I don't think Hamilton boosted the Ferrari share price to that extent.
7%. It was a bit.
I think that's been debunked as a little bit of a coincidence. However, there is definitely going to be a clear commercial advantage. As a Hamilton fan, I have to sit there and go, I think he's still got it. I think he drives in a very different way. I think his attitude is a little bit different. I think when you've got a legacy on the line, it's almost like you've got more on the line. You're gambling with more every single time. So if Verstappen, now he's going to win, say he wins 4 this time, and he moves to Mercedes in 26 and doesn't beat Antonelli, is Verstappen's legacy dead? Is it gone? Is it diminished? Are we not a little bit too harsh with drivers to go, oh, well, what, you go there and you don't win a championship at Ferrari, therefore your legacy's gone? Like, how soundly would he have to be beaten by Leclerc for everyone to go, oh, well, he was rubbish all along? I think worst case scenario, people will go, well, he's kind of old. So that's what happens.
I don't know. Ask Alonso. He didn't win a championship with Ferrari, and he's still very vocal, thinking he's probably one of the best drivers that has ever lived as well. So yeah, he will very much tell you how good he is. So I don't know. Like, I would love Lewis to go there and succeed. My gut feeling is Leclerc. Yes, he makes loads of mistakes. He's very fast over a single lap, but if Leclerc beats Lewis over a season, that's not going to be a particularly great reflection onto Lewis. And also seeing how the Mercedes relationship has gradually gone slightly sour as well. If it doesn't get off on the right foot, I could see Lewis maybe leaving early out of the contract. If it doesn't work, he can maybe do a Mansell and just that I'm out of here, and just sort of leg it. I really hope that doesn't happen. I hope Lewis doesn't end his career on that. But I think this is a genuine possibility. I think everyone's saying, he's going to go there and dominate. I think that's very, very optimistic.
Okay, I'll give you the other side. I think we might have been fooled into thinking that Hamilton's on the decline because of how desperately he's been trying to help Mercedes get out of this slump. And I don't think it's controversial to say he's been running actual competitive sessions with test equipment on. He's been running experiments for Mercedes, has been very invested in trying to get them out of this slump. So, people will point to, okay, well, he's had bad results against Russell. Generally, those have come from weird qualifying. What the hell is going on in qualifying with Hamilton? That's a huge mystery. And he's putting it all on himself. But I think there's every possibility he could go to Ferrari and that disappears. But you get, if you look at the races, even when he started behind Russell, he's generally been faster on a Sunday. And how many times have we seen Russell arguing about position and then just, then drop back and go? So I genuinely think Hamilton's been far stronger than Russell on a Sunday. The Saturdays have been really weird. I think there's every possibility he turns up at Ferrari and he's in the same form he was in 2021. That's only a 4-year difference. So I don't think it's not inconceivable that Hamilton is as good now as he was 4 years ago in 2021.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I'd love for that to happen. Hamilton is also traditionally very, very, very good on the tyres, and maybe not in recent history, but Ferrari have been known to be tyre munchers. Basically, like they were in 2022, particularly, weren't they? So that would be interesting to see how it goes. But Leclerc is famed for his 1-lap pace, so I still think Lewis will struggle in the qualifying.
Yeah,
I still think he will. relationship-wise, I think Leclerc and him will get on really, really well. Leclerc seems like a very, very nice chap and not one to play nasty games or anything. And him and Lewis do seem to get on really, really, really well. So I don't know. We could even see, the elder statesman Lewis maybe helping Leclerc to a title in a couple of years before he kind of retires. Maybe if Leclerc gets it together, in reality, I'd love Lewis just to go there and go, yep, win his title with Ferrari. That would be epic. To get his ache to eclipse Schumacher in a Ferrari whilst doing it as well would be absolutely, it would just be fairy tale stuff. But as always, we know fairy tales don't necessarily come true.
You wouldn't get a Piastri diving down the inside of turn 4 at Monza lap 1 situation at Ferrari. By that point in the season, they will have already supported one driver or the other. So if one of them gets a run and they're in the title hunt, whether it's Hamilton or Leclerc, the one behind will support the one up front. I'm so confident of that. I think Hamilton would support Leclerc. If he got an early run, he had a great start to the season and Hamilton, just wasn't getting it together, but then Leclerc's the title favourite, Hamilton will absolutely support Leclerc. I'm so confident that he would do that.
Yeah, me too. And yeah, vice versa as well. And Gigi in the chat says Lewis is the first to achieve many things. He can probably achieve a World Drivers' Championship at 40 years old. He might be the first one to win a title at 40. I mean, that would be amazing. What a way to finish a career. I think this is basically flip a coin, 50-50. I don't think there's going to be media. I think it's either going to be really good or really bad.
So
and I hope it's really good, but I don't think there's going to be any middle.
So obviously I was devastated when the news came out. But now you say to me, okay, Hamilton now has an option to stay at Mercedes and he can undo it and he can stay and they'll kick out Russell or Antonelli. Now as a Hamilton fan, I wouldn't take it. I'm committed. I'm like, no. Whatever's happened to their relationship at Mercedes, it's done. That journey is finished. Now it's time for the Ferrari era. And I think however it works out, it's still, something that Hamilton has wanted and something that I'm going to look forward to. And never in my life did I think that I would end up having a season where I would cheer on Ferrari. I never thought that would happen. Excellent. Right, that brings us to the end of our empirical hour. Go and follow Kyle Power at Kyle Power F1 and go and check out the Missed Apex Moto GP podcast, available everywhere, but we'll put a link to the Spotify in the show notes below. And when is the next race? It's going to be next weekend at Phillip Island. Does that mean it's on super early?
Yes, it will be for us Europeans. It will be super early. For our friends over the pond, it will probably be a bit more palatable time. I can't remember the time difference, but
like Saturday night.
It'll probably be a Saturday nighter. So I'm not going to be getting up. I will be watching not the highlights, a rerun at a more reasonable hour. I'm not a young, excitable kid anymore. He gets up at city o'clock to watch motorsport anymore. I'm a bit too old and jagged for that.
And then you'll have your race review ready around, Tuesday. I'm trying to work on these guys to get them to do it on a Monday and get the race review out for a Tuesday. But also make sure you follow me at Spanners Ready. And what else have we got coming up? Oh, I'm going to put a link in the show notes below to Cambridge Science. So we've been doing this podcast for the last 6 months, me and Dr. Andrew Holding, but we've changed tack. It goes out on FM radio on Cambridge 105 Radio, but also it's available in podcast form internationally. So if you fancy a little bit of science chat, Dr. Holding is he's a cancer researcher, but he's a great science generalist and used to run a lot of critical thinking forums, skeptic in the pub nights and stuff like that. So we've sort of pivoted the show towards skepticism, critical thinking, addressing myths, and also taking questions from school children and stuff. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. And we have the first episode of that new era already out. So I'll link to that as well. But it's Cambridge Science, available on all your podcasting apps. Until we see you next, which will be midweek, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast.